This day in sports history. Hey, you're back. Thanks for stopping by for another edition of This Day in Sports History. This is your host, Steve White, for another trip around the sports universe for a lot of cool things that happened on this day in sports history. It's October 23rd, and on this day in 2000, it was the Monday Night Miracle. This was a battle of 5-1 teams, and for the first 3 quarters, only one team played like it. The Miami Dolphins came into the Meadowlands and proceeded to lay a beatdown on the New York Jets, leading 30-7 heading into the fourth quarter. Jets quarterback Vinny Testaverde was having a pretty rough night up to this point, with just 15 completions for 102 yards, and he'd also thrown 3 interceptions through the first 45 minutes of action. Jets play-by-play man Howard David declared the game over, and Jets fans thought the same thing, and they were booing on their way out of the stadium. But they were about to miss one of the all-time great comebacks in NFL history. Down 23 in the fourth, the Jets' win probability at that moment was less than 1%. Lavernius Coles got the magical ride started with a logic-defying catch that went in and out of the hands of Dolphin defensive back Sam Madison and into Coles' hands for the first touchdown in the run. That was also Coles' first career NFL TD. They tried the 2-point conversion, but they came up a few inches short, so the score was 30-13. Testaverde went back to the air on the next possession and hit Jermaine Wiggins for a 1-yard TD catch. That was Wiggins' first career NFL touchdown. The Jets kicked the PAT this time to make it 30-20 with 9 minutes 50 seconds remaining. But still, their win probability at this point only went to about 6%. A field goal cut it to a 7-point game. The Jets got the ball back after their D-swarmed Dolphin QB Jay Fiedler and sacked him deep in their own end. A horrible Matt Turk punt gave them great field position, and then Testaverde went to work again, this time finding Wayne Krebet for a 24-yard touchdown, and after the PAT, the game was tied at 30 with 3 minutes 55 seconds left. The Dolphins pulled themselves off the mat and answered quickly with Fiedler delivering a 46-yard laser strike to Leslie Shepard to give the Dolphins the lead back at 37-30 with 3:33 to play. The Jets then went on a methodical drive down the field that included a 4th-and-1 conversion inside the 5. New York picked up 19 first downs in the first quarter. The fresh set of downs set up this play call and a touchdown by yet another first-time visitor to the end zone. Here's ABC's Al Michaels with the call on Monday Night Football.
Out of the tight formation. Fake to Martin, then a dump, and it is juggled and caught by Jumbo Elliott.
Elliott was usually an offensive tackle, but he had announced himself as an eligible receiver prior to the play. Jumbo, as his name implies, is a pretty hefty dude and is the heaviest player to catch a touchdown pass on Monday Night Football. The PAT tied it at 37. Testaverde, awful through 3 quarters, threw for 235 yards and 4 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. The game went to overtime, and at this point in the league, it was still first team to score, no matter how, wins the football game. The Dolphins got the kickoff, and they were driving, but a Marcus Coleman pick of a Fiedler pass squelched the opportunity for the Dolphins and then turned the tables in the Jets' favor. After a couple of first downs, the Jets sent out kicker John Hall for a 40-yarder, who snuck it inside the left upright for the game winner, ending the longest game in Monday Night Football history and the greatest comeback in Jets history. 10 years later, Testaverde recalled what it felt like to play that final quarter and said it was the closest that he's ever felt to being in that proverbial zone. On this day in 1993, Toronto Blue Jay Joe Carter lived every kid's dream, ending the World Series with a dramatic game-winning home run. It was the bottom of the ninth inning of Game 6. The Jays led the series 3-2, but trailed in this game by a run after a furious rally by Philadelphia in the 7th scored 5. Phillies manager Jim Fregosi brought in his closer Matt Wild Thing Williams, who promptly walked the speedy Ricky Henderson on 4 pitches. With just a one-run lead, Williams had to be concerned with Henderson stealing second and moving into scoring position, and for the first time that season, Williams began to use a slide step delivery to lessen his delivery time to the plate. He got a flyout from Devon White, but then gave up a hit to Paul Molitor to put men on first and second with one out. And to the plate strode Joe Carter, who'd led the team that season with 33 homers and 121 RBI. Here's Toronto's Tom Cheek with the call from that night for the Blue Jays Network.
Joe has had his moments, trying to lay off that ball low to the outside part of the plate, and he just went after one. 2 balls and 2 strikes on him. Here's the pitch on the way, a swing and a belt, left field, way back, Blue Jays win it! The Blue Jays are World Series champions as Joe Carter hits a 3-run home run in the 9th inning, and the Blue Jays have repeated as World Series champions. Touch 'em all, Joe. You'll never hit a bigger home run in your life.
Carter had a tough time finding the right words after the series winner, saying, "I can't even describe the feeling. I don't think they've made that word up yet." In the other locker room, Mitch Williams had fewer words, muttering over and over, "It's all my fault. It's all my fault." Well, Philly sports fans thought the same thing, and while they may be the most passionate supporters of any fans in the country, they also went way past the line of a sports fan, harassing Williams for weeks after when they saw him in the streets, and also throwing rocks through the windows of his house. And he never recovered from the Carter home run. He moved on to Houston the next year, and his ERA ballooned to 7.65. He finished his career in California in 1995, with his ERA only getting slightly better. Joe Carter's series-winning home run marked only the second time in World Series history that a walk-off homer decided it, with Bill Mazeroski's 1960 series winner in Game 7 as the only other one. Carter's home run was a storybook end to back-to-back World Series championships. The Blue Jays have not made it back since and have only played in one ALCS, that one back in 2015. So we've already talked about the longest game ever played on Monday Night Football. How about on this day in 2021 when it was the longest college football game ever played? The 7th-ranked Penn State Nittany Lions came into this game as a 24-point favorite against unranked Illinois, but both teams seemed to be allergic to the end zone, and after 4 quarters of mostly non-action, it was 10-10 and headed to overtime. In the first 2 OTs, the teams matched field goals. Heading to the 3rd OT, the format changed to each team having 1 play from the 2-point conversion spot. Everybody must have lotioned and lubed up between plays because the ball continued to go off fingertips and out of hands. It seemed like nobody really wanted to win this one. Neither team converted a 2-point conversion play in 5 consecutive OT periods. Finally, in the 8th, Illinois scored to make it 18-16. Penn State equaled it, and it was 18-18 heading to the 9th overtime. The Nittany Lions failed on their try, and Illinois finally ended the misery with a Brandon Peters to Casey Washington pass and catch, and Illinois pulled the upset 20-18 in 9 overtimes, ending the longest college football game in history. On this day in 1971, the Oklahoma Sooners rushed for a then all-divisions record 711 yards in a 75-28 win over Kansas State. The Sooners were running the wishbone offense back then, and they ran it to perfection. Seriously, a good wishbone offense is a beautiful thing to behold. When done right, it's like seeing the inner workings of a precision, multifunction Swiss watch. The Sooners were working like a Rolex against the Wildcats on this day, scoring on 11 of their 12 possessions that they had in this football game. The only miscue for the second-ranked Sooners on this day were when the second stringers came into the game late and they coughed it up. Their 711 yards on the ground would be the record until Oklahoma bettered their own mark 17 years later in 1988. And interestingly enough, the Sooners set the new standard in '88 against Kansas State with 768 yards rushing. And on this day in 1886, it was labeled the $15,000 slide. Even though there wasn't an actual slide, and it was actually worth less than $15,000. But, semantics. So this was the baseball championship, and I mean, since we're calling things that aren't actually a thing, you could call this the World Series, even though the first official World Series by Major League Baseball standards did not happen until 1903. Well, the 1886 series was a 7-game winner-take-all showdown between the National League pennant winner, the Chicago White Stockings, and the American Association champ, the St. Louis Browns. Whatever the total gate receipts were would be the prize given to the winners. This was Game 6 at St. Louis's Sportsman's Park, and the Browns led the series 3-2. The White Stockings took a 3-0 lead into the 8th, but the Browns rallied for 3 to tie the game up. The game went to extras. In the bottom of the 10th, the Browns had runners on 2nd and 3rd. Chicago pitcher John Clarkson mixed up his catcher, and instead of low and outside like his battery mate wanted it, he threw high and inside, and the ball rolled to the backstop. Kurt Welch jogged home from 3rd, scoring the winning run, and the Browns had won the championship series. So even though this play became known as the $15,000 slide, there was no slide by any of the accounts written that day, and the payout to the team was about $13,782. The Browns owner kept half of that money and then divvied up the rest to his players, working out to about $575 a player. And time now for today's non-sports Did You Know? Hollywood starlet Hedy Lamarr, who made 30 movies in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, developed frequency hopping that was used initially in a torpedo guidance system during World War II. Now, that same technology is what makes cell phones, GPS, and Wi-Fi possible. So, if you're listening to this on your smartphone, you can thank actress Hedy Lamarr for the tech. That's all I've got for you today, and if you have a moment and haven't done so already, subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on. And if you are listening on Apple Podcasts, consider a 5-star review. Each additional one helps the show rise up the charts just a little bit and get noticed by other people. Appreciate it if you do, and I'll be back tomorrow with another edition of This Day in Sports History. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.